Hey there, everyone. Chris Stegall here with MK Partners, and I am joined once again by Matt Kaufman. Matt, thanks for hopping on.
Happy to be here.
And today we are going to be talking about connecting Google Sheets and Salesforce, a tool that uses a variety of names. Let's call it Data Connector for Salesforce, Salesforce Connector for Google, Google Connector for Salesforce, whatever you're comfortable with. But Matt, why don't you talk us through this tool?
Yeah, maybe we should create a spreadsheet of all the different possible names using the different words. So I've been, working with Salesforce for a couple decades now, and I do a lot of data manipulation. I think that I'm very comfortable with Excel and with Google Sheets. And years ago, I used to use what was called the Excel connector, which was actually an add-on for Microsoft Excel desktop software. And it was awesome because it could pull in data from Salesforce. You change it in Excel and you push it right back. And we lost that at some point. That stopped being something that we had for whatever reason. I mean, personally, I don't even use Microsoft Excel anymore. I use a Chromebook, and so I don't have that software anyway. So I would have lost it no matter what. But the business process that I am missing is something that I've been yearning for forever, where I can just quickly modify data in bulk, right? Create formulas in Excel.
Was it like a live connection, or was it like an import kind of feature?
It was a button, so it wasn't real time changing. As I type something, it would change, but I would manipulate the data and then click a button saying basically push back to Salesforce. So one button to pull in, you do whatever you need to do, and then one button to push back. I would do math, I would do pivot tables, I would do sorting, I'd fix mistakes. Went back when you didn't have state and country pick lists. We'd get, we're in California, so we'd get things like California with a capital C, California with a lowercase c, CA, CAL, typos where someone spells California wrong. And if you're pulling in leads from outside systems, or you have a web to lead form or whatever it may be, you typically don't enforce those validations on the Salesforce side because you want that data coming in. You don't want to risk that there's an error with whatever is feeding the data. And so you would get a lot of junk. And so this was a process where we could manually clean up junk, but in a faster way than one record at a time, edit. And so I really miss that. And so, yes, I still have the data loader, dataloader.io, MuleSoft. There's plenty of tools that we can use to extract data, even transform it to some extent, and then load it back in. But it's still not that same kind of feel that you have when you're like, oh, I see this problem and I just want to fix it. And the tactile fixing in Excel, even though it's not technically tactile, as a databasey person, that sense of accomplishment of look, in 5 minutes I was able to fix something. Of course, buyer beware, safe harbor notice. You should never bulk edit data in production. That sounds like a terrible idea that we would never recommend without definitely having a backup. And so my process used to always be do an extract of data, save that file, make a copy of it, and now I have that backup in case I need to revert. And I have reverted data multiple times in my life because there is no undo button in Salesforce. So I always have a backup. And that's a good practice for anything you do, regardless of whether it's Salesforce or any other system. Can't hurt to have a backup, right? At least short term. You don't have to keep it forever, but it can't hurt. So a couple of years back, I was, I believe, at Google's I/O conference up in Mountain View at Shoreline Amphitheater. And Salesforce had a talk on the agenda, and so I went to it. Normally when I'm at those conferences, it's all Google all the time, and there's nothing Salesforce related. And I saw Salesforce, and it was actually employees of Salesforce that was giving the talk. And I was like, whoa, worlds collide. And so I waited in line for this small little talk in a weird dome type of room. And that was when I first saw this Salesforce connector that we're going to show you in a minute. And they had these employees at Google and employees at Salesforce, technical folks. I don't remember their exact titles, but they worked together to release this free tool. It really is a free tool. I know that Salesforce is a vendor to Google. There are people at Google who use Salesforce, and obviously there are people at Salesforce who use Google. And so they somehow came up with this kind of collaboration where these technical folks got together to build this free add-on. And I'll go ahead and share my screen now, or if you can click on it. This is the official listing for this tool. So it's made for customers of Google Workspace. It used to be called G Suite, but customers of Google Workspace who also are customers of Salesforce, or at least have Salesforce in some capacity. So I don't think that Gmail end users really get this. This is for businesses, but you might be able to use it if you're a Gmail user in your personal Sheets, Google Drive type of thing. I've never tried it there. I typically use it for work. But this is the official listing. You see it's made by Google, but it was made by them with a lot of input from Salesforce. And it's kind of like that old Excel connector tool that I used to use. I think the main differences are, if we come down here, there's some new features, but there's some limits. I believe the limit is like 10,000 records or rows that it will pull in from your Salesforce org. And I think the Excel connector used to be able to do more than that. I remember working on like 50,000 back then. But 10,000 is pretty good. And if you think about this whole concept of, hey, it's really dangerous to edit data anyways, maybe you shouldn't be editing more than 10,000 records, using a tool like this where you're almost editing directly in the database, right? There's a small step where you just have to click an extra button. So it's not as bad as like running Apex in your org. But, if you had to edit 100,000, you're just doing it 10 times. It's not the end of the world. And what's nice about Sheets or Excel is that you can do things in a more programmatic approach by using formulas and macros and things like that. So it's not just a human making changes. Like I said, it's for Google Workspace customers. And depending on your Google Workspace organization, which we happen to be a customer of Google Workspace as well, you may be able to install this. You may need permission. You may have to talk to your Google Workspace administrator, but it is something that is installed kind of globally for the organization, or at least the ability to install it is done globally. It's like whitelisted or approved, and then individual users can use it. So you can see I've already done this for our organization, and like I said, I've been using this for a while anyway, so I have some practice with it. Once it's installed and you open up a Google Sheet, here we go. Under extensions, you'll see there's a couple options here, and let's pretend like this wasn't here already. So we've enabled it for the organizations. You would go and click Get Add-ons, and then you would type in Salesforce Connector. You can see it's already coming up. And this is the official Salesforce one. You can see I have it installed already, but if we click on it, it's that same page that we were looking at a second ago, and then you'd install it from here. I believe you might have to refresh after you install, so just something to be aware of. But once you've done that, then you'll see I have this additional menu option here called Salesforce Connector. And it's not going to automatically be on every time you're using Google Sheets. It's only going to be on when you enable it. So it's not like it's going to take up more memory or accidentally send data to Salesforce if you're looking at Salesforce data or anything like that. There's still additional steps, so there's safeguards in place. But I'm going to go ahead and enable the add-on, and it's not going to do much. It's just going to kind of change the menu. That's all. So you can see nothing really changed here. But now I have this option to open it. And so this is going to connect to my Salesforce org, and it will, the very first time you do it, you're going to have to authenticate, of course. I think I'm already authenticated, so I don't have to go through the sign-in flow, but normally you would have to. And these are the kind of the default options here. I would recommend reading the subtitles because it's not always intuitive. We're not in Salesforce, right? Most of us spend our days and our nights in Salesforce. And so we think of those words from the Salesforce perspective. But this is not from the Salesforce perspective. This is from the Google Sheets perspective. So for instance, the reports option is going to pull data from a report in Salesforce into the spreadsheet, which makes sense, right, when you say it that way. The import option, this is where it's kind of a little flipped, is going to import data into the spreadsheet. We're not importing data into Salesforce. versus the update option that is going to insert or update data into Salesforce. So these are kind of flipped. It's taking the approach of, hey, I'm in Google Sheets. These are things I want to do to Google Sheets. Not what most of us using data loading tools would think of like, oh, I want to import data into Salesforce, so I'll click the import button. I get this wrong almost every single time. So don't feel bad if you two get it wrong. That's just, it's okay. It just means that we're so used to what we do that when we're working with something new, it's an adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll do the reports one first. This is something that I often like from a flow perspective. I know how to run a report in Salesforce and get that report to be filtered just on what I want. And then that's the data that I want to pull into here and then maybe do some type of update, right? So if we come to my Salesforce here, we have a bunch of reports here. Here's a report on Trailhead badges. So we have an app in our org that we've installed called Trailhead Tracker, and it basically provides information from Trailhead. And so here you can see there's a bunch of information about Trailhead badges that are in the on Trailhead, the website, and it's in our org. And then we can assign them to people and stuff like that. And so a while back, I went ahead and I assigned a bunch of badges to people. And so you could do that using this tool. And the bulk assign badges, it's much easier to do using a tool like this than to go one by one inside Salesforce. So here we can see a bunch of badges that are there. And if I come to this here, I can go reports, and you see the name is new badges. I'm going to go ahead and there we go, new badges last 90 days. And I'm going to just import it into the active sheet. I won't group results. We'll just hit get data. And it should work. Now, this is the same as if I exported the report from Salesforce. It really, the power of getting data out of Salesforce is not revolutionary. What is nice is when you combine this with formulas or macros or pivot tables or something like that, then you're taking it beyond just, I did an export, big deal. And so, of course, once it's in here, I can do all sorts of stuff. I could do, let's see, a formula field that says, does this contain mobile, right? And we'd say equals, find, let's see, mobile. We'll say here. Oop. And one of these is going to say yes, so you can see there. And so, yeah, this is just like, an example. If I'm looking for mobile badges, something we could do. We could say title, description length, right? Or name length, right? Length. Yeah, and so anyone who's familiar with Excel or Google Sheets is going to immediately see the value of being able to do this type of stuff quickly in here and not necessarily have to create formula fields in Salesforce just for these one-off purposes. I would not recommend creating a formula field to calculate the length of the date. You just need for like 5 minutes. And so this is a way to kind of do those 5-minute calculations without having to create fields, especially if you have a governance process. You can imagine like, okay, I need a field to count the name length just for 5 minutes. Okay, we'll get it deployed in 2 weeks. Like that's terrible. And then delete it 2 weeks later, right? Like that's not the right way to do stuff. And I wouldn't recommend, well, just temporarily create it and then delete it when no one's looking. Like that's not good either. And so this is a way to kind of give people control to do the work they need to do, but still respect the governance process outside of the work is being done outside of Salesforce, the governance inside Salesforce, that type of stuff. So I use this a lot when I have to do like sanity checks, or I need to I have to figure something out, and I'm like, I don't know if that's correct or not. Let me see if I can figure it out. And I realize, oh, we're missing a field. Of course, I can always come in here and just export. Very easy to do, and then open it up in Excel. But that's just an added step. And often when I'm doing that type of math, I'm actually cross-referencing multiple reports, right? So let me cross-reference these 3 reports and try to figure it out. And so pulling them all into the same spreadsheet just makes it that much easier. Same thing if I'm loading data. If I'm loading data and it's not millions of records, it's a small subset of data, Often what I'll do is I'll pull in one sheet of users, one sheet of accounts, one sheet of contacts. Now I can load my opportunities, things like that. So it's really useful. I'm going to go ahead and do this import option here so you can see what this looks like. So if you don't have a report already made and you want to pull in stuff like this, let me go ahead and pull in user badges, I think it's called. Custom user badge. Here we go. Or is it this one here? Maybe it's this one here. And we can pull in as many fields as we want. Now, there is a limit to the number of fields. I don't remember the limit, but it's pretty high. And so I'm not going to hit it on this. But if you were to import a really big object, you might hit the number of fields limit, and then you have to start unchecking the ones that you don't want. I'm going to uncheck some that I don't want now because we don't use all of these fields. We'll actually keep some of them. There we go. And you can edit the sockle yourself. Sometimes what I actually do is I use this to do queries that are kind of like tricky. You have to know how to do the query, but sometimes I go back and forth, so I could use data loader maybe to do the query. Or if I have it stored in like a little notepad, I could do that too. But let me go ahead and hit next, and then we can filter. Let's go ahead, active user equals true. Sure, that's a good filter. And let's just leave it at that. And so we can see here, and then max rows to import. So if we wanted fewer, we can definitely do that. And let's go ahead and hit get data. It's probably going to be a lot. So this might take a minute or two. Hopefully not so long that we have to edit the video. All right, there we go. And so you can see, and I pulled in some fields that I probably shouldn't have, is deleted. Probably shouldn't have brought it in. That's okay. Now, what's really important is when I did this import, or if I'm pulling from a report, that I have the record ID, the Salesforce record ID included. Because if you ever want to do an update back into Salesforce, you need that ID. So now we have this here, and I can start moving stuff around. I can delete stuff. I can do whatever I need to do on the spreadsheet to just make it a little more usable for my purposes. And let's say I wanted to update something. So like here we have the assigned date of this user badge. I actually don't know much about this badge, but what's really cool is I can take this ID here on the left-hand side. I can go to Salesforce and I can just paste this. Hopefully everyone watching already knows this, but every record in Salesforce has a unique ID. And we can see here, this is a user badge that's assigned to me, knowledge basics for Lightning Experience. It looks like I first attempted it on October 30th, 2018, so a while ago, but I did finish it. You can see there after 2 minutes, I finished it. I'm assuming it was a simpler badge if I finished it that quickly. But you'll notice the assigned on date and the due date are not filled in. And we have 10,000 of these records, or some very large number of records. And so if I wanted to update the assigned date, we can see here assigned date, and I wanted to update maybe the due date. Let me take away some of this other stuff. I can do that. I can try to fill in those dates. Now, dates are always tricky because you need to know the right format for the date. Let me go ahead and paste in these things here. And hopefully this is the right format. If not, we'll try again. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to insert update. And what I probably should do is actually delete all the data other than the one we want to insert or update. But here you can see it selected that one. So even better. It knew that I'm only going to do that one because I had it selected. And so I have to now tell it, what am I doing? Right. So even though I just did an import, it doesn't know that I want to update that same data. So I have to tell it. So this is it. It was a user. Let's try badge. User badge. There it is. Oh, it did know. Okay, great. And here we have to map all the columns. So here record ID needs to be mapped. I don't need to map any of these other columns except for the ones that I actually care about updating, for the signed on, due date. Normally I would do multiple records. I wouldn't just do the one because that's the power of doing this. 1 second. All right. In a Google Sheet is that we're going to update multiple records, not just one. One I can do one at a time, not a big deal. let's go ahead and try this out. I actually don't know if this is going to work because it may not be the right format for a date, but we'll try. It also says inserting, which is a little concerning, but I think I'm doing an update. It says up there, update. We'll see. Okay, and it did it. And we got a success. And so now if we come back here and we refresh, and I cross my fingers, we should have those dates there. Should being the keyword. Let me just hit edit. Nope, did not work. Interesting. Well, let's try that again. Actually, before we try that, this is now becoming a debugging. Okay, so it is a date time, not a date. So that could be why. So let's do it one more time. This is now a debugging video. So I want to just come here and paste. And I'm going to highlight this row, and I'll start this operation again. Oh, wait, you know what? I want to do an update. Oh, did I just? Yeah, no, I did it. Yeah, update. Okay. So we're going to do an update of the one row. And we have row 2. It's one record. It's got the right object. We already saw that. And I need to map the ID. I'm going to take off all these other things that I don't care about doing. So assign date and due date. And you'll see, like, if it didn't map it to the right one, if you know, you would have to come in here and figure it out. Okay, which is the right one.
And if the field didn't exist because you created a column in Excel and then made a formula, it wouldn't create the field in Salesforce. You'd have to create the field in Salesforce before it would show up on this mapping list.
Right. So we would have to create that field ahead of time. And then you actually would have to refresh the little connector as well, because it does the metadata describe when you first start using it. And so you'd have to refresh that. And I've done that where I'm creating fields on the fly as I'm loading the data. Okay, so record ID is mapped. These two date time fields are mapped as well. Let's hit execute and see what happens. It should add a new column, column U. Okay, it says it's successful. Let's just make sure this is the ID of the record I'm going to. Well, that's so interesting. I wonder if it's because it's in the past. That could be it. Let's see what let's debug this, right? So let's go ahead and paste that in there and hit save and see if anything happens. Well, that worked. So I have no explanation for why this is not working. If
you redo the import into Google Sheets, can we see what the format looks like in Google Sheets?
Yes, let's do that. There's also a chance. Remember, I did not authenticate. There's a chance this is pointed to one of our sandboxes. And if it was a full sandbox or a partial sandbox with this data, that could also be it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an import again, and we'll see. Actually, let's type in badge, user badge, next. And we said active user, next is true. We'll add that. And then if I really wanted to, I could actually just filter on the ID. So we could say record ID equals, and then take this ID. Right? This is not going to be a bulk operation, obviously. And let's do this in a new spreadsheet or a new sheet, worksheet, and we'll hit replace. Oh, did I only select the one field? Yeah, I did. Okay, let me fix that. Do it one more time. Okay, so it brought it in, and let's find that date field. So we don't need system, we don't need last reference. It's still loading. I'll wait. Okay. Don't need connection. Okay, and there is that format right there. This is the one that we were trying to also populate. let's do it one more time. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of more columns since we don't need it all. What's this one? Status. Okay. Last attempted, first attempted. Okay, we're going to try it one more time. I'm selecting this and we're going to hit. So it is the right org, right? We can tell it's the right org because that value got updated after I did the change. Okay, so row 2, count 1, update. Was I doing insert?
No, you did update. I feel like it's confusing because then I think it says inserting.
Okay, and I don't know, you know what? I did not map this here on A, so that could be why too. I may have skipped this step. I did not do that. So we'll hit next. And then what we'll do is if this works, we'll also do it on the previous spreadsheet just to see if it works there too. Because I think I was just going way too quickly because I was so excited to show off this app. Okay, so we'll hit execute, update.
It says updating, not inserting. I just had the screen so small that I couldn't read it.
Yeah. So I wonder if I was doing it wrong before. Well, obviously I was doing it wrong. We know that because it wasn't working, but maybe that was the issue. Yay, that worked. Okay.
Nice.
Okay, so let's look at that one more time. So imagine we were in this situation. We have this lot of data here, and we really wanted this assigned date and this due date filled in, right? And ideally, it'd be filled in with at least the date that it was finished. So what I could do is I could take this huge list here of things that happened in 2018, paste it in, right? And then I could go and select this data. Let's just go ahead and select it all. And what you'll notice is the settings over here on the right-hand side are still in place. So you can actually kind of like do this across multiple worksheets if you needed to. I just need to update the selected range. And so that limit of 10,000 is not the end of the world because you could have multiple worksheets at the bottom, first 10,000, second 10,000, A through G, H through M, that type of thing. And so we're going to say update. And here's that key thing I forgot to do is the ID column. Now we have a title for this video, multi-decade veteran forgets the most basic thing when updating data. And we'll hit next.
You don't want to make when you connect.
Yes. Number one mistake you don't want to make when making a video on how to do something. Don't forget to map the ID field. And we'll update these here. We'll update, just what we need, nothing more. Always a best practice to only update exactly what you need, both in terms of the records and the fields on the records. And then what I'm going to do just to kind of, prove that this, for instance, is not already populated, we'll go to one of these records. Here we go. It's another badge that I did a while ago. And we'll hit execute, and we're going to update 3 records. And anyone who's used the data loader or data.io or even the old Excel connectors, seeing probably this process and be like, oh yeah, I get this. This makes sense. You know the use cases for fixing data here and there. And let's just refresh. And it worked that time.
Nice.
Yeah, and so if we look at any of these other records at random, you'd also see that those worked as well. And normally what I do is I actually have a report that shows me all the data that I need to fix, right? Show me all records where the state is California instead of CA or it's spelled wrong or whatever it may be. And so then as I update the data in Sheets, I keep refreshing that report to see did it work, and am I getting closer to what I need to do. So this is a great tool. I love using it. I'm in Sheets a lot already anyway. And so it's just nice to be able to pull it in here. What's also nice is that when you pull data in and you save this sheet, you have that like kind of record in time. And so, if I were to look at something a month from now, well, it's possible someone went back and updated an opportunity, right? They may have fixed some data. And then I would wonder, well, why are my numbers wrong? But by having this this tool import the data into Sheets, I have the record locked in time. And so then I know that, oh, my process works. My math was correct. the data has changed since I did my math. And so I really like backing things up, and I'll create little worksheets at the bottom that name what each thing is. So this will be user badges, and this will be badges, and this will be opportunities closed this year, whatever it may be. And then I'll have the one sheet where I did my pivot table or my math. And so then, when I present numbers, I say, this is as of this date. And I, give the entire worksheet, or spreadsheet to whoever I'm presenting to. So they understand that, based on the supporting data included here, here's the math that we did. And so I often will have these kind of locked in time for a certain amount of time. I don't keep it forever, but maybe we do this monthly or we do it quarterly. And so I can use this tool, kind of pull in a lot of data, and then use the magic of pivot tables and formulas in the sheets to do the calculations that I need to do.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then, of course, the most dangerous option that you have here is to bulk delete data. I don't even click this button, and I'm not going to for this video. Sorry. But you can bulk delete data. So if someone made a mistake and you need to delete it, you can do that here. It's the same thing. You just have to have an ID column, and it'll go ahead and delete those records.
And then just because it's kind of small on my screen, and in case somebody's watching on their phone, so the screen is small, the thing that we forgot to update, where it was that column A, that was it asking which column here contains the record ID. Is that right? And then you said it's column A. Yeah,
so this update button can be used to both insert or update data. And since I wanted to update data, I had to specify, which column. It's actually weird because you specify it twice.
Yeah, because you said here's record ID included.
Right. So the first is saying that, here's the record ID. When you're doing an update, you have to specify there's a record ID. But you can also do what's called an upsert, which is an either or. If there's an ID, go ahead and do an update. And if there's not an ID, put an insert. There's a good chance I inserted a couple records during this demo, and I'll delete those records if I did. But there's a chance I did. But that's what this is here, just specifying which column has it. And then I also mapped it when we were doing the mapping as well. So it's two-part there. My guess is maybe you don't need to map it if you're specifying it on the previous step, but I can't hurt to do it. And if someone wants to figure it out, let us know in the comments.
Yeah. And then I am also curious. So it looks like I see created date in there.
Uh-huh.
And if you can pull in created date and like last updated date.
Yeah.
And then if I edit them here and then push that back to Salesforce, would it take the timestamp of when I did the update, or could I overwrite the last updated date and make it look like it was updated in the past or the future?
Right. So this question is not specific to this tool, but I'll answer it anyway. Okay. So you cannot update what we call the system audit fields. So created date, created by ID, last modified date, last modified ID, those cannot be updated. However, there is a hidden permission that you can enable that allows you to insert values into those fields. So if you're ever loading historical data or migrating from one system to another, and you want to use the built-in audit fields to say, this is the last time this record was audited, even before we had Salesforce, you can do an insert of that data. You got to get it right the first time, though, because if you made a mistake, you'd have to delete and then reinsert. And I've done that many times. It's a hidden permission. You have to enable it for the org, and then you have to create a permission setter profile that includes it for the user. And you'll be able to populate the created date, the last modified date, as well as the by, assuming that those users exist in Salesforce. Okay. And so when we're migrating people onto Salesforce for the first time, one of the things that we have to decide is how far back do we go? And what do we do if Sally worked here 3 years ago and created some records, but she doesn't work here now? Do we want to create Sally as a user, but she'll be inactive? And that way we can see that she's the last person to have created or edited these records? Or do we just choose a generic user like, former employee, and we just put it in there? The old way of doing things before this hidden permission existed was we created text fields, and we would store that data in the text field. So the created by might say October 2023, but then we'd have this extra date time field or text field that said legacy created by, and it would have the original one. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but if you have the ability to populate the correct date, you might as well. And that way you have fewer fields and it's less confusion in the future and things like that. But these tools will not let you update that audit data. So anytime I do an update to data, it's going to show that moment in time, regardless of which tool I use. And regardless of what time zone I'm in, also, it gets that moment based on who's looking at the record.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice try.
Yeah, that seems like how I would want it to work if I was in charge of security. And
yes, yeah, I mean, exactly. That's the thing. Multiple people have put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to show you is something that's really kind of near and dear to my heart. When again, decades ago, when I worked at Salesforce, at one point, one of my duties was to run weekly reports and compile these metrics and statistics that the client needed, the customer needed. Because it wasn't possible to just run a report. We had to like massage the data and do various things. And so I would, had this process where I'd use the Excel connector, pull in data, and then I'd pivot tables and macros and all sorts of stuff that would go and result with, okay, here's exactly what you asked for as a weekly report. And so we are a lot closer now to being able to do that again without that Excel connector, because one of the features of this Google Sheets connector is the ability to do an auto refresh. And so you can actually schedule the tool to pull the data again on a regular basis. You can do a manual refresh, of course, but you could do a schedule and say, okay, I want the data in sheet 1 to be refreshed every 24 hours, every 8 hours, etc. And then if you have your pivot tables and you have your formulas, or you have some what Google Apps calls app script, which is like a script, JavaScript that you can run inside your sheet, and create like these powerful macros like we used to do with Visual Basic, then you can basically run a whole business process that's based on Salesforce data, but it's running inside the sheet. And so you can combine this connector with AppScript and pivot tables and charts and all sorts of stuff, and produce reports that normally a human or a team of people might have to do. You should be able to fully automate that. The alternative is you can write Apex, you can write Lightning Web Components, and you can definitely hard code it into your Salesforce org. But then you're relying on a developer every time you need a change, versus by keeping it inside a spreadsheet. Obviously, if you're using code in the spreadsheet, you probably still need a developer. But if you can get away with pivot tables and charts inside the spreadsheet, then you're reducing the reliance on developers or consultants and enabling other people, administrators and data analysts, to get to the data and do their jobs without having to, require code to be written. So that this can be a really powerful tool. Obviously, we're not going to run millions of records on it, but for things that are done weekly, like, hey, how many new deals did we have this week, or things like that. What was the average deal size, and things like whatever it may be that you need to run, where it's a smaller amount of data, 10,000 or less. This can be a great tool to kind of produce those reports that you can't easily produce, because you need to cross-reference multiple tables inside Salesforce.
And then I'm assuming that the connector and the credentials are like associated with your browser or Google account. But then you probably want to be careful if you share this sheet with edit access that somebody doesn't make a change and you pop back in and then sync it, and then they've made a change in the org that you didn't anticipate, right?
Yeah, great question. So I'm logged into Google as me, and I'm logged into Salesforce as me. If you open up this spreadsheet, you're not going to be able to connect to my Salesforce. So at least I hope not. You can try it out, right? We'll delete the spreadsheet also, and it's not publicly shared. But yeah, so it's me. But the refresh, if I schedule the refresh, is running as me.
Yeah.
So the ability to update, import, delete data, etc. You're not going to be able to do that. And actually, I mean, let's just do this right now, right? So I'm going to go ahead and share with you a link to this while we're on the call.
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and share it. So first of all, it's in my private drive, so you probably have to request access. No, you're in there. Okay, great. And so go ahead, see if you can use do you want to share your screen or do you want to just try it?
Oh, I am view only mode.
You're in view mode. Okay, so first of all, yeah, so I shared it in view only. Let me go ahead and I'll share it with you in less than view only. You're now an editor. Okay.
All right, let me share my screen here.
All right, so now we're watching your screen. I see it up there. It looks a little different than mine. I think I had a yellow menu bar. You have a blue one. And what you're going to want to do is go ahead and hit the extensions.
Oh, it's grayed out for me.
Oh,
but I'm still view only. Let me refresh.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. Extensions.
There we go. Extensions and see, and then Salesforce connector, and then open. Okay, see, so it knows that you're not me right away. And so you don't even have access to use this yet because you haven't given permission for this app to work with your Google Workspace. But once you do that, even, let's go through the motions and just make sure that you can't import or query data as you. Yeah, see, so it's even making you log in. So you don't have to go through this whole process. But what's kind of neat, so me as a Salesforce person, I could pull this data into a spreadsheet and then share the spreadsheet with you. And you may not even have access to this Salesforce. But we could, if we were collaborating on something, we might work at the same company and we each have different Salesforces. You might be responsible for the marketing team Salesforce. I might be responsible for the sales team Salesforce. We could collaborate through this sheet and synchronize data. It's a crazy use case, right? It's definitely not what it was designed for, but you could authorize your Salesforce. I could authorize mine, and we just using this one spreadsheet to synchronize between the two. And so we can facilitate an integration with this, and that's a great low-tech, low-cost solution if you needed to do an integration. A human would be involved, right? That's okay. Sometimes it's okay to have a human involved because the time we're talking about, if I have my sheet auto refreshing every 4 hours, every 1 hour, every 1 day, all you have to do is come in here occasionally and click the update button and update your Salesforce, right? Or insert data into your Salesforce. That's not that bad. That's probably going to be more cost effective than us building out a custom integration, at least in the short term, not the long term.
Yeah. But then if I did change something over here, like made this the 30th instead of the 31st, then it should update on your screen too, because we're in the share.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
And then if you update, it will take that new value.
Right. So I can now delegate work to somebody else, whether it's somebody who has access to Salesforce or not. Yeah. Like say, here's the data. Do me a favor. Do your magic and figure out the correct dates, the correct field values, whatever it may be. And then when they're done, I go do the push. And so this allows you to kind of extend your Salesforce team to people who maybe don't have access to Salesforce or don't have the access to write all that data, right? You might still have read access, but you didn't have the write access. And so this, lets us do it. And again, the nice thing about doing it in a spreadsheet, it's very easy to clone a spreadsheet, either by cloning the whole file or duplicating the worksheet at the bottom. And so we have a backup. This is what it looked like prior to Chris making all the changes to the data and Matt pushing that data. And that way, there's no chance that we make a mistake and can't undo it.
Yeah. Very neat.
Yeah. It's a great tool in our toolkit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't always need a super robust data loading or ETL tool. Sometimes the small ones allow us to get the job done and get it done quickly.
Yeah. Probably in the best interest of Salesforce terms of service, not to think too hard about how you could avoid buying seats for people and having them use Excel, because you lose a lot of the security and functionality doing it this way.
100%. This does not replace Salesforce, but every once in a while we do have like accounting teams that just need the data. They don't want Salesforce. They don't want to look at Salesforce. They just need the data. And this is a way to facilitate them getting the data every 4 hours or every day, whatever it may be. I think that's a fair use case. If you're not going to be entering data, you're not going to be really using Salesforce. It is a lot to pay for someone just to get a report once a week, right? And so this is kind of a workaround for that. I think at the end of the day, whether you talk to someone at a consulting firm like ours or Salesforce, the company themselves, they don't want the price to be a hurdle, right? They don't want to say only people with licenses are allowed to look at the data. At the end of the day, we want our customers to be successful. And if that means that some people use Salesforce and they rely on it daily, and other people just look at some data once in a while, that's okay. We don't want to necessarily charge extra just so those people could look at the data.
Yeah, it's probably a good gateway tool to inspiring Salesforce use, because there is something more meaningful about being able to manipulate the data as opposed to just getting a email report subscription that's, here's the numbers, and you're like, great, but I want to see how these relate. And then once you start doing that, maybe you're an accounting exec and that gives you ideas for reports you want to see in the future. And then you're having such a good time that you're like, you know what, give me a seat, because I want to be in Salesforce, like manipulating some of this stuff on that side. And so probably a good tool to get people to make that move from Excel to Salesforce.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you could see that if you were a system administrator and your job was to keep creating reports and then export those reports into spreadsheets, at some point you're going to be like, you guys can just do this yourself.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. My time is too valuable to be constantly creating reports and spreadsheets for you. Plus, it is always a good idea for us to be on the same page, literally looking at the same screen. So there's no chance that head of sales is running a different report or looking at the data in somehow a different way.
Yeah.
And so, like one person thinks they're doing a great job and someone else thinks they're doing a terrible job.
Yeah.
So, at least here we're allowed to pull in reports. And so that we can use the same report. But if the accounting team is then doing some manipulation of the data or running charts that look different than the charts in Salesforce, that could be confusion. They say, look at the blue graph. And they're like, mine's green. What are you talking about? So it is always the best practice to be on the same page. But this is, a good, like you said, gateway or stepping stone to at least getting people the data they need.
Cool. And then I think I know the answer to this, but if you do a formula field, or not a formula field, sorry, a formula in Google Sheets, and it produces a value in that cell, and then you do an update, it's going to take the cell value, not the formula, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's like doing a copy paste special essentially.
Yeah.
And so I do that a lot, right? I'll calculate something and it gives me an integer or a string, and then it'll push back the value. Yeah.
Cool.
That's a good question.
And then, do we know if this works with Marketing Cloud?
This does not work with Marketing Cloud.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is connecting to Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, what we call platform, and Marketing Cloud really is a separate, entirely platform.
Yeah.
From the Salesforce platform. So this is only connecting to that. And so this is a Salesforce system administrator tool. I consider a Marketing Cloud administrator to be a different person typically.
Yeah. And then I guess last question, when you had pulled up that window for editing the SOCL, is that, does that run after like the filters and stuff you'd set in the sidebar, or instead of those filters?
It's instead of.
Okay.
So your choices are build a query graphically or just paste it in, which is actually the same as the data loader. If you go back to the traditional Salesforce data loader, there's a little check boxes there where you can build out your query, or you can just paste it in at the bottom. What's nice about the Salesforce data loader is as you click the check boxes to build a query, it displays the query.
That's cool.
So what I often will do is I'll use the data loader to build out a query, then I save it in a text file, and maybe I add some stuff to the where clause and things like that. But once you have it saved, then you can use it anywhere.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was the only other question I had. Is there anything else in this piece that you think we ought to show off?
No, that was really everything. I mean, like I said, the pièce de résistance was the refresh, the automated refresh. And like I said, like you can start to use this tool for all sorts of either one-time processes or even ongoing business processes. So it is a great tool to have in our toolkit, and not widely known. Like I said, I learned about it when I was at a Google conference, not a Salesforce conference.
Yeah.
So hopefully more people will know about it now that we've made this video.
Yeah, and I hadn't heard of it, and in Googling for it, discovered that it has lots of names. So hopefully this will help narrow down people's search for the right tool as well.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for walking us through that. Thank you, everybody, for watching and joining us. As always, be sure to like and subscribe here to the channel. Join us weekly as we do these quick Salesforce content collections and our regularly scheduled programming, news, updates, feature releases, and everything in the world of Salesforce. So thanks once again for watching. Matt, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.